You're at university, you're totally skint, you're in your overdraft, life is tough, and there's some weeks before you're going to get any more money. You're barely scraping by. But then something amazing happens. A few months previously, you were entered into an academic competition, and you'd forgotten all about it. But then your lecturer calls you into his office and announces that you've won. And not only that you've won, but the prize comes with £1,000 prize money. A prize that will immediately change your financial situation. What an answer to prayer. Then in your heart, you feel God say, yeah, I want you to give that money away to a couple who live just down the street from you. What would you do? Would you suppress that sense, that voice, that prompt? Do you reason with God that you're the one who's in need? That you're skint and you need that money? What would you do? Hold on to that thought. Back in September last year, when we first gathered around Jesus on the mountain to hear Jesus teach us what it truly means to be a follower of his, and he gave us the Beatitudes, that foundation of the Christian life. And he began with this: God blesses those who are poor in spirit and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses those who are poor in spirit and realize their need of him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. To be poor in spirit is to totally reject the idea of spiritual self-confidence, of arrogance, of pride. That we don't need God or we don't want God. Or that because of who we are and what we've done, that we're good people, we earn our place in heaven. We deserve everlasting life. Poverty of spirit is the absolute opposite of that. It's a posture of humility and of reverence, total dependency upon God. It's knowing that our deepest need is God. For when we're in that place, we enter into the kingdom of heaven because we have woken up and realized our need of God. We fall on our knees before God and confess to our wrongdoing. We receive the grace and the mercy and the forgiveness of God. We are blessed with spiritual healing, new life, in authentic relationship with God. We're freed and liberated from all guilt and shame and sin, from the burdens that we cannot carry. We receive the perfect reign of God in our lives, bringing true meaning and purpose, both now and in eternity. And so, poverty of spirit is the starting place, the steadfast foundation of our relationship with God. It's the pathway that leads us home to God and his perfect love. And over the past few weeks, we've seen Jesus teach how this might look in our everyday lives, in our everyday relationships. We've heard Jesus speak about anger and lust and integrity, about giving, about prayer, about loving our enemies. And just last week, Jesus spoke into the sacred union of marriage. And now Jesus turns his attention to something that has plagued humanity since, well, forever really, that fights to keep us as far away from God as possible. That undermines that first and most important beatitude. And that's money and possessions. It's wealth, it's property, it's cash, it's stuff. Actually, it's anything that takes the place of God in our lives. The history of humankind could be seen as one relentless race to get more and more money, more stuff, more power, more influence. And the more we get, surprise, surprise, the more we want. And the more that we think that we're in control, and so the harder it is to know that first and fundamental beatitude of Christ, that God blesses those who are poor in spirit and realize their need of him. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The further we are from this beatitude, the lower God features in our priorities. We stop going to church. We don't make time for God in our daily devotions. We're not serving in the life of the church. We drift further and further away from God. And remember, friends, Jesus is talking to his followers. He's not talking to those who don't know him. He's talking to those who are closest to him. The warning is very real. He's talking to you and he's talking to me. And so Jesus teaches us plainly, as Jim read for us, starting at the end, verse 24. No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to your job, to your hobbies, to your device, to your family even. Anything that takes the place of God as God in our lives threatens to spiritually enslave us and prevent us from living the lives that God has for us. And friends, we have so many idols. So many. When I was at work in industry, I had the idols of pride, of status, of wealth, of selfish ambition. And you might think that when you become a pastor, you don't get idols. Oh, no, when you become a pastor, you get a whole new set of idols to pick from. The size of the church, your social media presence, your influence, your gifting, your theology, your charisma. What are your idols, friends? What are your idols? What takes the place of God on the throne of your life? Because we all have them. We all have them. Yet we are so often blind to them. Or that we know that we have them. Or we say, well, it's not much of a bigger deal, really. It doesn't matter. I've got it under control. It's nothing serious. Jesus says you cannot serve two masters. And he's absolutely right. We can't love and serve God well when something else is on the throne of our lives. And I've learnt this the easy way, I've learnt this the hard way, and I've learnt this the very hard way. You simply cannot serve two masters. And we need to know and keep coming back to that first and foundational beatitude. This is the thing that should always be on our lips and in our hearts. The first teaching of Jesus of the Christian life. God blesses those who are poor in spirit and realize their need for him. That's a daily thing. Realizing our need for God. For the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Because what I found is that when God becomes the number one priority in your life, above your job, your marriage, your children, even your life, when you surrender all to God, then you receive true life. You know what? You become a better spouse and parent. You become far better and wiser in your job. Your relationships improve. You grow in love and grace. You become more fruitful for the kingdom of God, and you find yourself sharing Jesus with others in perfectly natural and fruitful ways. You find blessing in the small things. And what a gift that is, to find blessing in the small things of life. And you see more and more answers to prayer because you're starting to pray for the things in accordance with the will of God. You're starting to pray for the things that are on the heart of God. When God is on the throne of your life, the holy God of love, of light, of truth, when he is reigning in your life, he is making you more and more like his son, Jesus. Each day, each month, each year. Which is actually the very purpose of life. To become like Jesus. And when that happens, the scales fall from our eyes and we begin to see the world for what it is. Our vision is transformed. Again, working backwards, Jesus saying from verse 22, your eye is like a lamp that provides light for your body. When your eye is healthy, your whole body is filled with light. But when your eye is unhealthy, your whole body is filled with darkness. And if the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep that darkness is. Friends, our eyes are the gateway to our souls, the throne room of our lives, the holy of holies, the deepest parts of who we are. When we truly recognize our need of God, when we invite Jesus into our lives and ask him to reign on the throne of our lives, our eyes, our vision, our discernment, our spiritual sight changes how we see and perceive and understand the world. And this brings God's light into our bodies, our hearts, our minds, and our souls, into all of who we are. We become far more healthy and whole before God, and become more like Jesus in the small, everyday things, in our everyday relationships. But when we fail to recognize our absolute need of God, when we pursue our own agenda, when God is marginalized, whenever one of the millions of idols that the world offers us is on the throne, we focus and fixate upon that which will draw us away from God. And that spiritual darkness will fill our lives. It doesn't happen like a cliff edge. It happens one Sunday when we don't go to church. It happens Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday when we don't meet with God at any point during the day. And slowly but surely, we drift away from God. And I've been there. And you find yourself suddenly in a place where you're like, how on earth did I get here? And it's usually a very bad place. Little decisions, little choices. Not prioritizing our relationship with God will draw us away. Jesus said, if the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep that darkness is. That's one of the most harrowing warnings of Christ in the scriptures. If the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep the darkness is. So many people are searching in our community for that thing that will fill the void. It could be buying stuff, career progress, casual sex, drugs, alcohol, gambling, social media presence, video games, entertainment, whatever it is. If the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep that darkness is. Friends, only God can fulfill our deepest needs in this life. Only God can bring true meaning and purpose. Only God can bless us with true worth and value. And as I shared at Beryl's service of Thanksgiving on Friday, Jesus said that I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but you will have the light of life. Here's the other side of Jesus' statement, warning about the light and the darkness. If the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep that darkness is. Now listen, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, that will have the light of life. Jesus said, I am the very way to God. I am the very truth of God. I am the very life of God. And it's through faith in me, Jesus says, that you can come home to God, home to the relationship you were made to have, home to the one who is love, who is light, who is truth, who is everlasting life. You can come home. You can stop searching, stop longing, stop trying this, that, and the other to ease that restlessness. Just come home to God. And I will show you the way, because I have made a way through my death on the cross and my resurrection to new and everlasting life. And when this happens, when we confess that we are poor in spirit and that we realize our total need is of God, and the kingdom of heaven is then ours. And so gradually we see through all the empty promises of the world. We see that all that glitters is not gold. And we see truth. We spend less and less time pouring our time and our energy and our resources into storing up treasures on earth. We spend more and more time pouring out ourselves, our energy, our time, our resources into who God is calling us to be and into what God is calling us to do. We become more and more like Jesus, slowly for sure, but surely, steadily, we are being remade. And as we do, God is preparing for us a reward. Not that we deserve one, but God is the God who is generous and extravagant and wonderful. That as we continue on this pathway, as our lives become those of total loving surrender to God, the most beautiful place imaginable, not only do we get God, God rewards us. When we live a life where God is on the throne, where the reign of God is in its fullness, where the love of God rules over every part of who we are blessed. Doesn't say that he makes our lives easy. He doesn't. In fact, if Jesus says anything, that when you become a Christian, your life gets a whole lot worse. Not worse, but more difficult. Not worse. More difficult. Let's put it that way. But I would say that's true. I would say that's true, that my life is more difficult than if I'd have just carried on doing what I was doing. But I tell you what, the blessing far outweighs it all. And that's a blessing I've received now, let alone the blessing that we receive when we pass through death and go to be with Christ. It's worth it every single time. Every single time. Jesus says in Matthew's Gospel, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they've done. So often we ignore this a bit about reward, because it's, it might make us into, it's a salvation through works. It's, if I do this, I'll get into heaven. Yeah, I understand that. We're saved by faith, but Jesus is really clear. If you are sold out for him, if you are living for him, there is a reward. There is a reward. When Jesus comes again, he will reward each person according to what they've done. So what idol right now is keeping God off the throne of your life? What is more important to you right now than God? than loving and serving God, than becoming the man and the woman that God has created you to be? Can you see a way of toppling this idol off the throne of your life? If not, just remember what Jesus says. Humanly speaking, it's impossible. But with God, everything is possible. And I'm sure a lot of us here, if not all of us here, can testify to that. Humanly speaking, it's impossible. But with God, everything is possible. When I was at university, absolutely broke, and God told me to give that £1,000 prize money to the family down the street. I did it. When God told me to stop martial arts, when I wanted to become the hardest man that I could, and I had a violent fantasy of who I could be, I did it. And that was deliverance. Later in my work, when God told me to turn down 2 incredible job opportunities that would transform my career, my wealth, my opportunity, I did it. When God called me and Louise to leave our careers and live by faith, to follow him in complete trust, we did it. And he kept us there for 7 years. When God called me into the ministry, to leave behind my own plans for my future, we did it. And that was so incredibly hard to do. I cannot tell you how hard and difficult and challenging that path has been. Not least because every time a major idol in my life had to be overcome so that God could reign in my life. This is not boasting. Please understand that. I want you to give experience of my life. Every time there was an idol, God then said, right, okay, that's good, you've done that. Here's the next thing. Here's the next thing. Here's the next thing. And gradually, step by step, I might become the man that God has created me to be. And that I might do the things that God has created me to do. And by God's grace, and despite my many failures, despite my own sin and my brokenness and my many weaknesses, I am more like Christ today than I was 20 years ago, than I was 10 years ago, than I was 5 years ago. The time that you have known me, I've become more like Christ just a little bit. You might not see that. You might think, flipping heck, he's got a long way to go. And you'd be right, of course. But let me tell you this, every time I've chosen God, every time through God's help I've sought to crush the idols in my life, knowing I cannot serve 2 masters, I have received such tremendous blessing from God. Often in ways that I could never see. And often, in fact, pretty much all the time, it's never blessing in the ways that the world would understand blessing. It's certainly not financially, it's certainly not in status or in power or in influence or any of those ways. Sometimes when I look at my friends on Facebook who I went through university with, who I worked with, and the car that they have, the cars that they have, the houses that they have. One friend at the minute is in Nepal, mountaineering this way and everywhere. And sometimes you think, oh, yeah, that'd be nice. But then God, you're reminded of what is important. You're reminded of my greatest need, which is God. And I have something that they don't. Something that brings blessing right now. And I would never swap it at all. I'd never swap it, what I'm doing now, for anything. But the blessing I'm receiving now, but the blessing and the reward that comes later. It's all good. It's all, it's wonderful things to look forward to. Incredible things to look forward to. But that is a hard journey, friends. And it is one of costly sacrifice and pain and difficulty. But it's worth it every single time. Every time you ask God to remove an idol in your life, you will be blessed. You will be blessed. Jesus says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they have done. This Sermon on the Mount is famous for a reason, because it transforms your life. It's wonderful, it's challenging, it's painful at times, but it's glorious. It is glorious. Because every step that you take and every time you strive, you meet with Christ in that place. And there's nothing like meeting with Christ. Amen.